I'm Jeff Hirsch, and in this video, we'll take a look at what's new in Adobe's Lightroom Classic version 14.3, which was just released. There's one huge new feature that makes this point update a significant one. With the update to version 14.3, Adobe is adding landscape masks to the already amazing masking system. So now, along with people, subject, object, background, sky, and the various range masks, we now have the ability to create AI-generated landscape masks. And the same way that people masks allow you to mask off smaller areas of a person like hair, skin, eyes, teeth, clothing, etc., the landscape masks are likewise capable of detecting and automatically masking off smaller areas in your image containing things like sky, mountains, architecture, vegetation, water, artificial ground, and natural ground. I have to say, for a brand new tool, it works quite well in most cases. And like the other masking tools that we've already had for a while, I do expect that it will get even more accurate as Adobe refines the models that are used to calculate these masks. It couldn't be easier to use, so let's just jump right in with some live demos. Let's start with this picture taken in Croatia last fall. I'm going to go straight to the masking tool, and I'm going to click on the new landscape icon. Looks like a sort of a little hillside with a tree coming out of it. And when I click on the landscape masking tool, it's going to detect landscape features, water and sky. In this case, we got sky, mountains, architecture, vegetation, and water. And it did a pretty good job masking off each of those areas. If you look at the water mask, you can see there are a couple of areas that were over-selected on the side wall here. Given that we have a masking system and not just individual masking tools, it's a relatively trivial matter to take this mask once we've created it and subtract from it using the brush tool and paint out those areas we don't want to include. Let's look at some more examples. Once again, I'll click the landscape masking tool. It will detect the features within my photo. And in this case, we get sky, mountains, vegetation, and water. The only thing it seems to have failed to detect is this bit of natural ground, which it also might have thought was artificial ground, on the edge here. It included that as part of the mountains mask, but in other situations you'll see that it can actually detect both natural ground and artificial ground. In fact, let's go to the next picture. Hit the landscape masking. We have a mask for the sky, the mountains, the architecture, the water, and the artificial ground. And in this case, the artificial ground has missed a few areas, but those wouldn't be very hard for us to paint back in. Let's look at another example. In the case of this one, we have both artificial and natural ground that I do expect will be detected. Depending on the speed of your computer, this may take longer or shorter. In this example, we have a sky mask. Our architecture mask is pretty good, but you can see some areas at the back that it didn't quite detect, and you can see why it struggled. They're basically the same value as the sky. We have a mask for vegetation. We have one for the artificial ground that has all of the sidewalks, and one for the natural ground. That worked pretty well. Here's another example. I expect it'll have a tough time at the border between the sky and the water here. That's pretty indeterminate, so I imagine that the algorithm has a tough time figuring out where one ends and the other begins. In the case of the sky one, it's been pretty consistent. Mountains look good, vegetation looks good, and if you look at the water in the upper left-hand corner, it doesn't really know where the water stops and the sky begins. Otherwise, it did do a good job. And if I feel like it's over-selected, I could in fact make a mask out of the water and then subtract the sky from it to remove those little intersecting areas there. one more regular example before we look at some ones where it doesn't do as well. It has no trouble finding the sky and the mountains and the water. In this case, we'll have it look for our landscape features. And you'll see that it comes up with what I would describe as imperfect results. I have a good sky mask. I have a decent mountains mask, although it seems to be grabbing a lot of vegetation as well. I have a vegetation mask, which does a much better job of getting all the vegetation. And then my artificial ground mask works pretty well until we get to the back of the frame, in which it seems to have lost this area back here. So still not bad, doing a pretty good job of it. And this is an example where even if it makes an imperfect set of masks to begin with, we can probably use the masking system to add, subtract, or intersect to get exactly what we want. So in this case, the landscape masking has found sky, mountains, water, and natural ground. But the problem is that the natural ground is also picking up my mountain ranges. And if all I wanted was to affect this black sand beach and just select that, what I would do is I would go ahead and create that natural ground mask. And then I would go and I would subtract, select landscape, and I would subtract the mountains from that mask, which would give me just the natural ground. So we started with the ground, which was picking up too much. We subtracted the mountains from that, and that left us with a more accurate ground. And I find this technique works very well with these masks. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good, and they usually get me close enough that I can use the masks in combination with the other tools to narrow it down to exactly what I want. Let's take a look at another example that kind of falls in that category. Once it's detected my landscape features, we can look and see what it's figured out. It does a nice job on the sky, does a good job on the mountains as well, and the vegetation is picking up not only the grass in the foreground here, but the vegetation that's growing on the sides of the mountain. That is actually accurate. We have artificial ground over here, which is pretty good. It's missed a tiny little spot, but it's looking pretty good. And then we have our natural ground. And again, in this case, the natural ground has picked up more than I wanted it to actually have. If I'm trying to isolate just the grass here and not have the road or the mountains or the vegetation, I'll be able to do this by combining our various masking tools. I'm going to start by making that natural ground mask. I'm going to hit the O key to turn on the overlay so it's a little more obvious what we have. I'm going to subtract a select landscape, and I'm going to select that mountain feature, and I'm going to subtract that. So that's removed it somewhat from my area. I'd also like to remove the artificial ground, so I'll subtract again with landscape, and I'll subtract the artificial ground that it found over here. We're starting to build the mask up to what we want it to be. There's just a couple of areas left for me to fix. I can use a brush to paint out the area in the artificial ground that I don't want in this mask, and the little bits right along the seam of where the mountains hit the rest of the masking. So I'm going to start by doing subtract with the brush, and I'll take my brush over here and I'll remove this little bit from the side of the road that I didn't want to include. And I will also then come in here and I will remove from this mask the areas that were left over from when we subtracted the mountains out of this. And what I've been able to do is to use the various bits and pieces of our masking system to make a mask that perfectly covers the natural ground here. But it took a combination of these masking tools. The original mask natural ground selection took too much. We then subtracted the mountains, subtracted the artificial ground on the road there, and brushed out the remaining pieces, which you can see highlighted there, to get this final mask, which is a lovely, well-generated mask. The edges are clean, it isn't over-selected, it doesn't have a harsh edge, it's just a really natural-looking mask. Then I do want to show you one more example here, or maybe two examples, where the masking tools struggle. And you can guess that The tools probably rely on the color, the texture, and the location of features to figure out what's sky, what's water, what's vegetation. Let's see how it does with this, where I have artificial surface that is more colored the way soil might be. I have bricks in here that also happen to be sort of natural colored. Let's see how it does masking this scene. Sky, it does a pretty good job with. It has no trouble finding the sky here. Architecture, it struggles a little bit. It does have the obvious buildings. It got part of the fountain and the brickwork straight in front of us, and it did get the light fixture on the left. So it does seem like it was smart enough to figure out that those were architectural details. When I move to the vegetation mask, it's pretty good, but it missed a bunch of the vegetation in the near ground. Right in front of us are those sort of yellowish plants that it doesn't seem to have selected to include in its mask. The water, it's okay, but it's actually spilling over the front lip there onto the bricks, and we don't want that to be part of our selection. The artificial ground kind of struggles. It's picked up some of the water, it hasn't picked up some of the brick, and the natural ground, it's done okay. It's found some of the soil in the picture, but it's also included some of the brickwork that shouldn't be there. So you can see that the algorithm is good, but there are things that can fool it. Here's a really good example of how it's going to be fooled. Here, I'm looking at a reflection, except that when the AI looks at these reflected trees, it's going to think that they're vegetation. It's not going to realize that they're water. And sure enough, when I light up the vegetation mask, you can see all of those areas have been selected for being masked. And when I select the water, it's everything except those trees. So here's a situation where even a human might be fooled in this case. There's my artificial ground, there's my natural ground, but where it struggles is figuring out the fact that this, which should have included all of the tree reflection as being water, it thinks some of that is vegetation. On the whole, I think it does a miraculous job finding all these various areas and masking them off. There are two other notable changes with this latest update to Lightroom. One is a change in how transparent areas in an image are displayed on screen. In all previous versions of Lightroom, transparency was displayed as a solid white area. With the latest update, Lightroom now shows transparency as a gray and white checkerboard identical to the one used to indicate transparency in Photoshop. This unifies the experience across both programs and makes it obvious where actual transparency exists. And the other addition is the new Manage Catalogs menu item, which is found under File, Open Recent, the very bottom. This dialog will show you all of your recently opened catalogs in descending order by the date that they were opened. You can remove a catalog from this list as needed or clear it out entirely. Like most point updates, Lightroom Classic 14.3 also includes a slew of bug fixes, performance enhancements, and support for new cameras and lenses. But the big story with this update is the addition of landscape masking to our localized adjustment tools. For more Lightroom and Photoshop videos, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and go ahead and click the bell icon to get notified anytime I post a new video. And if you aren't already on my mailing list, head over to jeffhirsch.com and sign up for the mailing list, and you'll get updates on my classes and workshops and trips, along with bonus tutorial videos and articles for Photoshop and Lightroom. I promise not to spam your inbox, and I will never ever sell your address to a third party. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.